everyone. I have had some questions about how to solve problems like this where I give you a function. So this is a function. We're going to pretend it's defined in a function file. It's called video function. These are the inputs, these are the outputs, and this is the computation the function does. And the question is, if I run this set of lines of code in the command window, what are the values of A, B, and C? So I'm going to go through this example, and I'll ask you to do this by hand, both in the homework, and there will be a similar question on the exam. So I really want you to get a sense of what local variables are doing. So the variables inside this function are local variables. They don't exist outside of the function. Once I define them outside of the function, so in this case they have the same names as those local variables, which is what makes this confusing. Once I define these, I have access to these outside of the function. Then I pass those values into the function, in this case just the values of A and C. When I pass those in, it's going to get a little confusing because they take on different names inside the function. So I'm going to go through this example, and hopefully it clears things up a little bit for these function local variable questions. So let's get started. We're going to start with what these inputs are. So in this case, A is -2. So I'm going to, the first input, the input in the first slot here is -2. C is defined to be 5 in the command window. So the second input here is going to be 5. So just put a little comma to separate those. So once this function is called, once I hit enter in the command window here, MATLAB then goes and finds the file that corresponds to that function, so that's this file here, and it will input these values in the order that they are inputted into the function. So in this case, -2 will go into the first slot, which inside the function is the variable C. 5 will go into the second slot, which inside the function is called B. Okay, so when we go into the function, we have that C starts out as the value -2, B starts out as the value 5 inside the function. So I'm going to keep track of variables inside the function. So inside the function, these will be variables that are local to the function. And then I'll keep track of variables that are outside the function. So outside the function. These are variables that I have access to from the command window, and I can use in later computations. So let's keep track of everything. I'm going to be using different colors to correspond to the different variables. So let me go ahead and pick a different color here, say green. Okay, so we're starting out with -2 and 5 for our values for C and B. So let's do this first computation. Right away, C, this local variable C, is getting overwritten. So you'll notice here, it's going to be equal to itself, so that's this C here, this is the current C value, plus B. Once this command runs, because MATLAB runs everything from top to bottom, so it's going to start with this first computation of C. Once this command runs, C will have a new value. So let me just show you what it looks like. So now, when the first line runs, it's going to be C equals the current value of C, which is -2, plus the current value of B, which is 5. So inside the function, C is going to be equal to 3, -2 plus 5. So now let me see what this corresponds to in terms of our variables outside the function. So in this case, C is the third output variable. So it's in the third spot in the output. And when we called the function, the variable that we put in the third spot, we named it A. So outside the function, we have A equals 3, the value that corresponds to that third spot. Okay, so this third spot inside the function we found takes on the value 3. So when we called the function outside in the command window, whatever was in this third spot now has the value 3. Okay. So let's move on to the next calculation. Okay, so MATLAB has finished that first line. Now we're going to move on to the next line of the calculation inside the function. And now we're computing this variable, this local variable A. And this is equal to b squared minus the now current value of c. So remember, c was updated in this first line. C took on a new value, and that new value carries through to the next line. So inside the function we have a equals b squared, so b is still 5, so this is 5 squared, minus the updated value of c, which is 3. So this is going to be 25 minus 3, and that gives us 22. Okay, now let's see what this corresponds to in our function call. So the variable a is in the first spot of our output variables. And when we called the function, the variable that we put in the first spot, we named it b. So outside of the function, b is going to get the value that the variable in that spot was assigned inside the function. So in this case, it will have the value 22 because that's the value that was assigned to the variable in the first spot. So that corresponds to b when we call our function. Okay, last but not least, we're going to do this last calculation. Remember, we're going from one line at a time, top to bottom, so we're on the last one. B equals a plus c. Now, this is the updated value of a, so it's going to be whatever value we got in this second line. And this is that updated value of c that we got from the first line. So inside the function we get b equals, now I'm just going to look at my values, a, which is 22, plus c, which is 3. So this tells me that b inside the function equals 25. And now I'm going to go look at what that corresponds to outside the function. So I just assigned the value 25 to whatever variable is in this second output spot. And when I called the function in the command window, the variable I put in that second spot, I called it c. So outside the function, I get c equals 25. Okay, so when I ask you to do these things by hand, I want to see computations like this. I want to see that you're thinking about each variable and that you're actually computing this by hand and figuring out what the values are and what they correspond to from the function. So this would be your final answer, but I do need to see the handwritten work when I ask for the values to be computed by hand. So I hope this example helped. I'm sure we'll probably review this again on Tuesday, but let me know if you have questions about this example or related examples.